Well, we are settling down as the second panel is starting. I think, was it not a very energizing morning? We had a wonderful, wonderful opening session, wonderful first panel. I am very, very encouraged by the fact that this is, for the first time, the General Assembly Hall has discussed the culture of peace. You are not hearing, listening? Wow, what happened? Can you? No, not yet. Okay, our sound engineer may be
There you are.
catching up. Okay, all right. So I believe that this was a wonderful start of this day-long program. This is the first ever high-level forum of the General Assembly convened by the President of the General Assembly since the program of action was adopted in 1999. And here I have a suggestion, before I forget, I say 13th September is the day when the program of action was adopted. Maybe we should have an anniversary or celebration every year to do that. So this time we are one day late, but maybe next year we should be 13th of September for all of us to get together. This was a very energizing morning. I am very enthused by the response from all of you, and each one of you. Can I give each one of you a hug from me? Okay, you have my hug. On the side, there are some wonderful materials. I think the most important thing is that you have this booklet. There are extra copies. So this is the booklet which contains the program of action and the declaration on the culture of peace. So this is a good one. Of course, the program you have seen, and there is, I hope there are copies still left. This is a 10-year report of civil society organizations on their performance during the decade for culture of peace. So this is a good document. And then there is a report by Mr. Federico Mayor, which is the development of culture of peace and nonviolence from 1988 to 2010. This is a wonderful, wonderful report, and this is available also online. So if the copies are finished, please read this. This is a fantastic document. And then you have this Unity magazine, which focuses basically on habitat issues, but have agreed to give a part of their magazine, every issue devoted to the culture of peace. And that is wonderful. This issue covers 3 young people who wrote about what culture of peace means to them. So this is wonderful, and please get hold of that also. So I'm very happy that you are here, and we'll start with Avon. But before that, let me welcome again, as the opening session did and the first panel did, Mr. Federico Mayor. And we are deeply grateful to you and indebted to you for, contributing enormously to the evolution of this concept of culture of peace. And we are very, very grateful to you for that. We have also joining us Cora Weiss, who spoke, I believe, representing all of us in the civil society, and we were very encouraged, Cora, by your speech, and particularly I'm so happy that you emphasized 1325 in a big way. So, Avon, I will call upon you. You have been involved. Your Culture of Peace Initiative website is a fantastic bringing together of hundreds of NGOs who are working for peace together. And I would like to welcome Avon Mattison, the President of Pathways to Peace. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Excellencies, distinguished speakers and guests, and peace builders around the world. One of the most wonderful things has happened is that this morning, with the extraordinary wisdom that was given in the General Assembly by all of the distinguished speakers, is that I had the opportunity to tear up my speech, which is both unnerving and also quite wonderful. And one of the thoughts that came to mind is to offer in this moment an opportunity to say that with this very first high-level forum brought forward by the President of the General Assembly on the culture of peace, it's the very first time that this has ever occurred. And it also is connected with the high-level forum that is occurring with UNESCO next week, as well as with the 30th anniversary, the 30th annual International Day of Peace, which is 1 week from today, September 21st. And so at this moment, I realize that what we are at this really remarkable opportunity where there is this concerted consciousness and focus on the culture of peace, not only utilizing our consciousness, but also all forms of media that are convergent at this particular time within this focalizing point here at the United Nations. And I wanted to begin with a couple of, I'm going to end up with some thoughts about this 30th annual Peace Day as a point of action, concerted action for all of us. But I was asked by one of my colleagues to say something about what inspired me about a culture of peace and why this is so important. And there is a couple of quotes I'm going to read from you because I have senior moments, so I don't remember this sort of thing. And this is from Nicholas Roerich, who great philosopher and statesman, who put forward an idea about a pax cultura, a culture of peace, and a peace pact between World War I and II, so that peace would become obsolete, and there would no longer be the solving of differences through violent means. We have a ways to go. Anyway, here is this quote that inspired me 50 years ago. Where there is peace, there is culture. Where there is culture, there is peace. Positive creativeness is the fundamental quality of the human spirit. Let us welcome all those who, surmounting personal difficulties, propel their spirits to the task of peace building, thus ensuring a radiant future. A second point of inspiration that was so marvelous was when UNESCO came forward with the whole focus point on a culture of peace, and the then Secretary, UN Director General of UNESCO, our very esteemed Federico Mayor, with whom it has been a privilege to work in the past. There's a particular quote from him that has quite great significance. And he said in an off-the-hand interview with UNESCO Press Report, "We need to build not only geographical but spiritual bridges between people and strengthen the intellectual, cultural, and communication linkages between our societies. Let us stand ready to participate in the effort to promote social integration and thereby create a culture of peace." And you've heard very much today about why we need to give extraordinary focused attention on the expansion of the awareness of and implementation of the Declaration and Program of Action for a Culture of Peace. It is really time, and we've heard that consistently through not only this morning, but the call to action from all of our speakers this morning. And Federico Mayor particularly pointed to that in his remarks this morning. So part of what I realized is why I had to tear up my speech is because I really want to hear from the rest of the panelists. And it's very important we hear from everyone here present because there's so much collective wisdom here. And also to be aware that this entire day is being webcast around the world, so we are sitting really within a global community. So on this 30th annual Peace Day, it is an opportunity, as it says in the Declaration and the unanimous resolution that established the International Day of Peace in 1981 at the General Assembly, to dedicate ourselves to peace above all differences of any kind. That is really our purpose within humanity. And that when we realize that we are one humanity and one planet and all of that, this is an opportunity for us to not only review our personal and planetary progress toward building a culture of peace on the International Day of Peace, but to recommit ourselves at all levels, individually and on a planetary basis, to building a culture of peace for the common good and for future generations. So with that in mind, this upcoming Peace Day, a small call to action is, please let us all do this individually, personally, and planetarily, not only to commit ourselves to doing whatever we can and even greater ability to foster a culture of peace, but also to remember that acting in concert, we do make a difference in the quality of our lives, our institutions, our environment, and our planetary future. Through cooperation, we manifest the essential spirit that unites us amidst our diverse ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Evan. I think this is a wonderful recap of what went into the early years of as the concept of culture of peace was evolving. Thank you very much for your years of commitment to this cause and your continuing efforts to promote and advance the culture of peace in the most synergistic way that one can think of. Thank you again, Yvonne. And I'm sure when we open up the floor, we will be able to interact with the audience. Now it's my pleasure to bring in Shireen Badawi. Shireen is the coordinator for an organization called Generation Waking Up. And that is the young people that we are talking about. And Shireen, we'll like to hear from you now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am so truly honored to be here. I come with deep gratitude for the incredible effort that went into organizing this first ever high-level forum, and with a deep sense of awe and appreciation for the peace builders and peace advocates and peace activists that are in this room. I also bring hope with me. I bring hope and a sense of inner knowing that a culture of peace is within our reach. I truly believe that. I'm here today to share with you all a window into my story as a peace educator, and also to give you a window into the stories of many other young people who are deeply committed to working toward the culture of peace in a world that is environmentally sustainable and socially just and thriving for all of us. So my story begins sprawled across an ocean. I grew up with a foot in Egypt and with a foot in the United States. My parents immigrated to this country before I was born with the earnest hope of making a better life for themselves and their families at home. And I think the experience of being a first-generation Arab in the US wouldn't have been that big of a deal if I'd grown up in New York City or LA. But I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, where I was the only Arab kid in my class. And some of my first memories as a young person growing up here were feeling embarrassed about myself. In kindergarten, my classmates used to make fun of the way my lunch smelled. My mom would pack me these incredible lunches of kofta and hummus, reeking of garlic, fantastic. But, you know, the kids in North Carolina didn't think so. And it was also my hair, you know, Sherfro I was called instead of Shireen until I was in 7th grade. And then I would go to Egypt, and it was my 27 cousins who made fun of my weak Arabic and my unplucked eyebrows and my hyper outspokenness for a girl, right? So always in between, I felt like I never really fit. And I realized from a young age that if I want to live in a world where I belong, and where all of us belong, then I need to be a part of creating that world. And so began my efforts, along with all of us in this room, to be a part of this mighty wave of humanity, deeply aspiring toward a culture of peace. I know that it can be hard to believe the culture of peace is growing when we are bombarded, as we have been today, with messages of hope and also messages of great despair and poverty and violence. But I want you all to know that from my perspective, working with many young people from around the world, it's happening. And I'm sure there are many people in this room who would agree. Our world is changing rapidly, faster than ever before, and amid an all-systems breakdown, we are waking up. We're waking up to our fundamental interconnectedness. We're waking up to each other and to the planet, and we're coming to understand that our well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of all life on Earth and to each other. We are recognizing the possibility and indeed the necessity of writing a different story together. There are literally millions of initiatives happening across our planet right now in service to a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world. Nothing of this scope has ever happened before. This move toward a culture of peace is humanity's immune response to the disease of our time. And nowhere can we see this more clearly than among today's young people. So let me give you a window into what's unfolding across the planet, because young people on every continent are already living the new story now. They are embodying the culture of peace. The initiatives I'm about to share with you all were all initiated and created by people in their 20s and a few of them in their 30s. Let's start with an organization called EcoMe. It's an ecological peace center located at the Almag-Jericho juncture in Israel, a rare zone where both Palestinians and Israelis can venture with relative ease. EcoMe is building community with the recognition that social sustainability is the base for ecological sustainability. They host monthly reconciliation circles, they teach nonviolent communication workshops, and they host regular jam sessions and poetry readings for young people. They also lead extensive week-long trips into the desert where young Israelis and Palestinians actually live together in a rather harsh environment and learn to listen to each other. Learn to listen, learn to care for each other, learn to navigate conflicts together. Organizers, both Palestinians and Israelis, say that the center is answering a deep need and longing among many young people who are tired of fighting, who are ready for a new story. And given the politics of our time these days, it's incredibly heartening to see young people taking the lead on generating the solutions, right? Excuse me. Another inspiring and living example of the culture of peace can be found in Zimbabwe, just south of Harare. Less than a decade ago, Marianne Knuth, a young dynamic leader with a mother from Zimbabwe and a father from Denmark, walked out of a life that was actually working very well for her, because it wasn't working very well for the people of her native Zimbabwe. She walked out asking herself how she might be a part of creating and recreating healthy, vibrant communities in the midst of a country and a continent viewed by much of the world as poor and lost. She convinced her mother to give her 30 acres of their family's 300-acre farm so she could create Kafunda Village. Kafunda means learning in Shona. And at Kafunda, communities from nearby townships and villages gather together to learn how to be healthy and collaborative and largely self-reliant in a world that is collapsing around them. They cultivate permaculture gardens, harvest rainwater, concoct herbal remedies, and call circles with the elders to remember the old ways and build community. Kafunda has become a model community that is showing many others what's possible when you come together to create your own solutions. Another innovative program began in Brazil less than a decade ago, all during the decade for the culture of peace, when 5 students met in architecture school. They participated in a city revitalization project, and they realized, since they were actually doing something practical rather than just building models, that their skills actually had the potential to make dreams come true. And so they designed a program called Warriors Without Weapons, where they use play, collaborative games, and group processes to work hand in hand with the poorest communities of Sao Paulo to draw forth community dreams and help vision, design, and bring them into reality. They train young people from all over the world, and now there are dozens, hundreds of Warriors Without Weapons bringing this model to their communities. And finally, I'd like to share with you all a bit about the organization I currently have the privilege to work with, called Generation Waking Up. Our mission is to ignite a generation of young people to bring forth a peaceful, thriving, sustainable, and socially just world. Humble mission. We do this through sharing the story of the many stories of young people building a culture of peace. We host transformational trainings to empower young people from around the world with leadership skills and tools, and we support them in organizing and serving in their communities. We also connect young peacemakers to major campaigns and initiatives that promote the culture of peace. And through our programs, we create a community of belonging, of shared purpose and vision, and of possibility for a world of right relationship with self, others, and the larger whole of which we are all a part. Which brings me full circle. Though each of these initiatives is unique, I think what truly all of them do exceedingly well is build community. Community, a sense of belonging, and a new sense of what's possible for our future. And I would say that a lot is possible for our future. This is an incredibly exciting time to be alive, as all of us know. And this is a time that I think history will look back on and say, these are the people, this is the generation of humankind that made the changes in their thinking and behavior that allowed the future of life to be. What feels incredibly important to me at this time is that each of us committed to the culture of peace become master storytellers. We must share the stories, for in the telling of the stories, we amplify what is true and we amplify what is possible. In closing, in the spirit of my dear friend, who is a friend to many in this room, Dot Maver, I would love to invite us to take a united breath for the spirit of the common good and the culture of peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shireen. That was such a wonderful inspiration from the younger generation, if I may say. This is beautiful, and I think you would carry the flag forward. You means young people will carry the flag forward of the culture of peace. And I think this is important, and I'm very inspired to hear all these good things that the young people are doing, inspired by themselves, and that's wonderful. And I like the point when you mentioned that you need to be also a good storyteller, because you have to tell your stories to inspire others so they can, and that's a very important point and a new element that you brought in, at least for me, and I learned that, so wonderful. So next speaker, Jeff Abramson, Director, Control Arms Campaign. And Jeff, I think, has to express many of his frustrations. Arms treaty failed, this failed, that failed. So we have to see how best we can move the agenda with keeping in mind those intergovernmental failures, if I can say.
That's fine.
Please, Jeff.
Great, thank you, and thank you all for having me, and it's an honor to be here. I don't feel as inspirational as the last panelist, but I will do my best to present some ideas for moving forward on the security side of the culture of peace and the peace and security agenda. As mentioned, I direct the Control Arms Secretariat. I've been on many panels. Sometimes I've been the 12th of 13th panelist. So it's a pleasure to be here, to have a little more time, but also looking forward to your questions. But I've always found I need to say something controversial at some point to keep you interested, but I'm going to save that till the end, so you have to listen to the whole part. But what I wanted to do was frame the issue that my global campaign is working on, tell you a bit more about the campaign, where we stand. As mentioned, the Arms Trade Treaty did not happen in July. I don't know how much people in this room know about it. It's not mentioned in the 2010 report except once in this issue area, so I'll talk a little bit about that. And then a little bit about, because we're at the UN, some comments and thoughts about the UN itself. This picture was our most famous one during July when we were doing a ton of work. This is the Manhattan Bridge with some tombstones that were part of the global campaign from the get-go, sort of framing in a very easy way to see why we care about the trade in weaponry. Start with a little bit from Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. This quote was repeated this morning. The world is overarmed and peace is underfunded. I think that's getting a lot of traction, and I think a lot of us agree wholeheartedly with that. There is some more here. This was in July, a 4-week conference, one room over, on the Arms Trade Treaty. The Secretary General was grateful enough to say many good things about the need for the Arms Trade Treaty, and I'm not going to read the rest of his quote here, but you can see talking about all the connections that the arms trade has to many different parts of the culture of peace agenda. I have to say that the culture of peace is not often talked about when we're talking about the trade in weaponry, but clearly it is impacting everything we do. A little bit of framing this issue. I haven't told you what these numbers are to get your mind juices flowing here a little bit, but this 1.7 trillion number has been out of the bag already mentioned this morning. This is the global amount that the world spends in military expenditures, be it weapons, soldiers, so forth. This morning, Secretary General called this a moral outrage. I think many within my coalition would certainly agree. The coalition that the effort we are working on is the trade in weapons, so not what your government might be producing, but actually the international trade of that, which is somewhere in the $50 to $100 billion range. It's actually a small number if you think about global trade is in the 20 trillion range. The trade in weapons has a disproportionate harm on the world compared to its size, and it's out of control. Then a little bit more about this. The trade in conventional weapons includes things like fighter jets, battleships, all the way down to handguns. The small arms and light weapon trade is very hard to measure. The latest number provided by the Small Arms Survey is 8.4 billion. It's obviously much larger because they are trying to actually use numbers that can be tracked. A lot of the trade is not tracked. But as a sense of why these numbers actually make a difference, this 18 billion study by Oxfam International from 1990 to 2006, the average loss to the continent of Africa was $18 billion due to armed conflict and armed violence. It's estimated in other sources that conflict creates a 2 to 3% loss in GDP on average for countries. These are the weapons that fuel these. These are the things that this campaign is about. Quick quote here, simply similar to what Ban Ki-moon said this morning as well. We use this a lot in our campaign, that the arms trade is out of control. It's actually true that bananas, agricultural products have global regulations. Weapons don't. The World Trade Organization intentionally leaves weaponry out of it because it's so controversial. At the street level, you tell someone that and they are shocked. It's sort of mind-blowing that the most dangerous thing in the world, there's no international agreement on how to trade it writ large. And we're trying to make that happen. As Ban Ki-moon said on July 3rd, that's a disgrace. I'm going to leave this slide up for a minute because I want to now talk about the campaign. I want to tell a little bit of the story, not a long story, but a little bit of story about each of these people that's in this picture. The Control Arms campaign, the ideas were generated by Nobel laureates. You can trace this back a long way, but in the 90s, in 2003, 3 organizations came together to found Control Arms: Oxfam, Amnesty International, and International Action Network on Small Arms. Today, it is a coalition of more than 90 alliances and organizations in over 150 countries. When I say the size, it's really hard to say because the West African Action Network on Small Arms itself is made up of 300 organizations in that region. So we encompass a broad range of civil society pushing to make this happen. And it started a lot of ways from what I think would resonate with people working on the culture of peace. It started with people's consultations around the globe. And in 2006, That led to a Million Faces campaign, in which 1 million people donated a picture of themselves to the campaign. It launched more efforts in the UN that led to over 100 countries submitting views on what the Arms Trade Treaty should be. Those of you who have ever had the UN ask your country a question, the number of countries that usually answer that is very low. So the fact that so many countries had an opinion on this was a demonstration of how important it was. And the vast majority of countries today do support an arms trade treaty. In 2009, for the first time, the United States voted to support this effort, even though they had been engaged in the past. And that launched a process that led to July of this year, through multiple preparatory committee meetings, of a 4-week conference, one door over in this building, and many sleepless nights for many delegates and non-governmental organizations. At the start of that, our coalition presented to Ban Ki-moon, probably the only recognizable face in this picture to most of you, a sense of why civil society cares. And why civil society cares is not the policy wonk that I am, but it's about the impact on the ground. So the first person on the left there, the young man there, is actually a doctor, a leader with the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, Dr. Ogebe Onazi from Nigeria, who presented a declaration from thousands of medical professionals around the globe about why the arms trade matters to them, because they are on the ground helping families cope, dealing with people who have been injured. Next to him, moving right as we go left to right, is Bishop Elias Taban, who is a bishop from South Sudan who used to be a child soldier, who realized that that was not the way to go. And he presented, as part of the petitions of work that we had done, an interfaith declaration for more than 375 religious leaders and organizations around the globe from all denominations. Archbishop Desmond Tutu is the person everyone around the world knows, but we had cardinals, we had leaders from multiple faiths in multiple countries, also giving the faith dimension why this matters. One of the speakers this morning was talking about how in some places their church was the only way they got news from the outside world. And I think Bishop Taban could speak and testify to how this mattered and why the Arms Trade Treaty was important. Next to him, a little bit obscured, is probably one of the other more famous people here is Salil Shetty, who is the Secretary General of Amnesty International, who used to be very active here in New York. And as you know, a coalition takes all types. There's a person who can play the game in the UN and speak globally about what he has seen. Next to Ban Ki-moon, this is the second Secretary General that he's met. This is actually Julius Arile, who is from Kenya. He's wearing his traditional clothes, who used to be a cattle rustler, whose brother was shot in the act of cattle rustling, and after that tragic event realized that was not the way to lead his life. He was our ceremonial millionth face in 2006 who presented the petition to the Secretary General at the time, Kofi Annan, and came back and helped present it here. He has since been a leader in his community. He's actually a marathon runner, participated in a race in New York where he beat everybody by a minute and a half, and it was a lot of fun. And he had a little T-shirt on the back that said, "Follow me at Control Arms." We were all having a great time. Next to him is one of our female leaders who is an amazing person from the Philippines, Jasmine Horario Galase, who is a professor of peace education in Miriam College in the Philippines and a leader in the International Action Network on Small Arms. One of those people that if you need something done, she gets it done. Next to her, and they were presenting a petition that was signed by over 600,000 people around the globe about the need for the Arms Trade Treaty. Next to him is Ross Robertson, who is a member of Parliament from Australia, from New Zealand. I know he's going to kill me. I made that mistake, sorry. From New Zealand, who is a leader of Parliamentarians for Global Action. And over 2,000 legislators from around the globe signed a parliamentarian declaration. These are the people who are going to have to put the laws in place. This is just a show and a quick set of stories about some of the people behind the call for an arms trade treaty. Okay. Arms trade treaty, 1-minute version, what we wanted to see happen was that all types of transfers of weapons and all types of weapons would become regulated, that there would be criteria applied to decide what's responsible arms trade. So things such as human rights, development, impacts on women, corruption should all be a factor in the arms trade. Right now, we think those apply, but states don't always agree. And finally, that this treaty be implementable. In July, on July 27th, the United States, then backed up by other people, said we're not ready yet. The treaty text, which had only been introduced the day before, is not ready, and a number of countries jumped in about, we're not there, we need some more time. Let me tell you, this is the little wonky part. That text is probably going to live on and become the basis for further negotiations. Whether that happens this year or next year will be decided in about a month in the first committee. But from our point of view, right now, some of the things that are on the table that I'd like you all to know, because I'd love you to get involved, and I'd like to get involved in the work you're doing. Right now, ammunition remains a very contentious issue. It's not included in the scope of the treaty in a full way. But at the heart of this treaty is the criteria. What will be the decisions made around the arms trade? The draft provides some things that should be prohibited. These are generally non-controversial. You shouldn't supply arms when there's an arms embargo, often broken. You shouldn't provide arms that might contribute to illicit trade in conventional weapons. And then there's this one that we're still trying to figure out: for the purpose of facilitating the commission of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. Also, common sense. The word "for the purpose" is, we're looking at legally. For the purpose is a very hard bar. No state actually says, I'm giving you arms so you can create a war crime. But, so that word we're going to be looking at. Then there were a set of criteria that weren't prohibitions in the same sense. There is a sense that when you're making an arms trade, you should look at peace and security, and then you should assess whether it would create a serious violation of international humanitarian law, human rights law, or facilitate or commit act of terrorism. If you make that assessment and there's an overriding risk, you shouldn't authorize. We don't quite know what the word overriding means. It was the first time anybody had ever seen it, so it's one of the things that we're trying to figure out. We had been lobbying for a term called substantial. We don't know what overrides what. The UN creates things that are hard to understand at times. And then finally, there's a set of criteria that's much weaker about states should take feasible measures to avoid these things: being diverted, being used for gender-based violence or violence against children, transnational organized crime, corrupt practices, or undermining development. This is a lot of what the Culture of Peace agenda is about. Right now, it's not as strong in the Arms Trade Treaty as we'd like it to be, but this, I'm just giving you a state of play. This is a work in progress, obviously. The implementation side I can talk about in questions. I think I'm close to my time limit, so this is my last slide, actually. I want to talk a little about the UN role and relevance. Obviously, those people who you saw pictures of, they do work, most of them on the ground, in their communities, in their parliaments. The UN is a distant place. And I think for many of you in the world, the UN as the drive is a distant place. But at the same time, for a global agreement, it's an important place. So I want to talk about it because it's an experiment for us to be going through the UN now when things like the Mine Ban Treaty and the Cluster Munitions Treaty had to go outside the norm. We got very good support from the Secretary General. We also, on July 12th, got a fantastic letter from these agencies of the UN who primarily deal with humanitarian issues and get it. They understand why the Arms Trade Treaty is necessary. But there are challenges within the UN system that I encourage civil society and states to overcome. Consensus. We know that consensus is torpedoing the effectiveness of the Security Council in its inability to act on what's happening in Syria. It's disgraceful. We know the Conference on Disarmament has been ineffectual for over a decade. I sit and I know that other committees that don't deal with disarmament somehow find a way to make an agreement in the end, but the drive for consensus in the first committee is a lowest common denominator drive, and it's not functioning. There needs to be a new way to think about this. It was very striking. I think the UN itself is having trouble supporting what we needed. During the negotiations, all the texts were in English. A lot of the conversations happened after the translators went away. It's a very weird concept of how this negotiation happened, but I've seen other things go along the same way. And we, speaking to our African colleagues who speak French, were exceedingly frustrated by the way this went in July. It's a challenge, I think, for the capacity of the UN. And then finally, civil society is regularly left out of the conversation. There are so many closed meetings, so many behind the scenes. There's always behind the scenes. But we spent the February PrepCon not meeting. We spent much of July not being allowed in the room. In many ways, it's silly because many states allow civil society on their delegation, so it's a myth. And in many ways, it's missing the voice and the rationale for why we need things done in the United Nations. So that remains a challenge to be overcome, and I think a simpatico one in this room. I will stop there. Happy to continue the dialogue and ask questions, answer questions later. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for that wonderful elaboration of how large your obstacles are and our obstacles are. But I was listening to you and I was thinking, how about banning toy arms? I think it has a stronger impact on the children than real arms. So we should also raise our voice to do that. You know, the gun-toting young tiny tots go around thinking powerful, and then they grow up with that feeling that guns give them power. And that is something that we should look into, maybe as a broader, but Control Arms campaign is a wonderful campaign, and we wish you luck and wish you good working with the member states. You know, sometimes taking things out of the UN helps, as it happened with the landmines treaty, because the UN failed and we went out, civil society generated enough enthusiasm. Next, Maria Butler, Peace Women Project Director of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, WILF, and Maria has been very active in advancing the implementation of 1325, particularly in the preparation of the US National Action Plan on 1325. So, Maria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Chowdhury. Good afternoon, peace advocates and peace messengers. On behalf of my organization, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, I am very pleased to be part of this important discussion because we are very much committed to the culture of peace. I would like to discuss two key aspects that we believe are central to peace and freedom: demilitarization and gender equality. We have heard today that militarization, defense spending at the high levels it is at, and the proliferation of arms violates human rights, violates dignity, and continues to create human insecurity in every region. Fear and violence are not part of the culture of peace we support. And when WILF, our organization, facilitated dialogues in the Middle East and North Africa this year with women's activists, we heard their messages that arms on their streets, that the proliferation of weapons and the militarization of their society and the systematic discrimination they face affects their work. I would like to share one story that I will never forget. I met Azza Suleiman this year, and last December, Azza was an unarmed, peaceful protester on the streets of Cairo. In Tahrir Square, she saw a young woman. It was an iconic picture that flashed around the world. A young woman in a blue bra. Her clothes were being ripped off her by military personnel. Azza did not stand by. She went to her aid and helped this woman. She herself was beaten into a coma. When we met this year, she had just recovered from her injuries, and she was not talking about hate or revenge. Her message was one of justice, the need for acknowledgement that the uncontrolled military power has brutal impacts, and she called for accountability. Like Azza, many know the impacts of military brutality, whether in Syria today, in Gaza, or those fighting for justice in the Pacific Islands or Burma or here in the United States. Indeed, militarism impacts our environment in many ways and also our economy. The Secretary General today told us that too much is spent on military. And the United Nations Charter in Article 26 calls for the least divestment to arms. Member States have not implemented that article of the Charter. We as activists, peace activists, must not be silent on this issue of military spending. We must call for a reinvestment in education, in development and equality. We must call for a shift in how people value education and development and equality. Indeed, the spending on nuclear weapons, the modernization of nuclear weapons, the billions of our dollars that will be spent over the next years investing in modernization of nuclear weapons we do not need is not an investment in the culture of peace, and we need to speak out together on that. I want to add to the point on the Arms Trade Treaty, because the Arms Trade Treaty is important that we all are aware of what is happening and what is going on. Our organisation, WILF, and Reaching Critical Will, our project, have said that the text of the treaty that we saw in July was not good enough. The loopholes that were in that text allowed countries to contract out of saving lives. It did not have strong enough provisions to prohibit the sale of arms where there are known violations of human rights, as was outlined earlier. It must also include gender provision. Gender-based violence, where it exists, is a human rights violation, and arms must not be sold to countries that are perpetrating gender-based violence. This brings me to my second point, and has been a part of the conversation all day: the importance of peace with the condition of equality. Prioritising politically gender equality is central to the culture of peace. And I want to share with you an example of what is the culture of peace. This letter was sent last week by women activists to the President of Colombia, calling for the full and equal participation of women in the upcoming October peace talks, for the inclusion of women's participation and women's rights in that process. This action, like the thousands of others by women's groups, we saw it in Liberia. We see it today in Afghanistan, where women are risking their lives for human rights. We see it in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where women are saying, let's not challenge the consequences of war, but the root causes, the links to natural resources in our country, the proliferation of arms. Indeed, the implementation of the commitments already made by our governments, the commitments in the Women, Peace and Security agenda, must be implemented by all actors, but must be implemented holistically. The aspects of participation, protection and conflict prevention must be seen as one and interconnected. Although we continue to see the commitments on paper, action has not followed. And indeed, in the last year, in 2011, the 9 peace agreements that were signed, only 2 provisions on women, peace and security were contained in them. Of the 14 peace processes underway last year, only 4 negotiating parties included a woman. We must speak out and challenge this status quo and the way people value gender equality. Today I have been challenged about how I can incorporate the Programme of Action on Culture of Peace into my work, into our work. And I also want to ask how each of us can, in a practical way, take this forward. Whether it's getting involved in advocacy on the Arms Trade Treaty, whether it's participating in the upcoming 16 days of activism, where the theme will be From Peace in the Home to Peace in the World, Challenge Militarism, or whether it's joining a global movement like ours, which will be 100 years old in 2015, a movement that has continued to link challenging militarism with equality and investing in peace. In conclusion, I would like to share some words I saw last month on the wall of Mahatma Gandhi's ashram outside Ahmedabad in Gujarat state of India. These words stood out to me, and today they speak to me even more. His words, "My life is my message," really remind me that our words or our resolutions mean nothing if they are not backed by our action. And I hope that we can take away the message of the culture of peace today and transform it into our own messages. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maria, for ending your wonderful presentation, for those very powerful words and inspiration to all of us. Thank you very much, and this is wonderful. And I believe that it is very important for us to show that in our work, whatever work we do, we try to bring in the essence of the culture of peace. We can do that in our daily lives, in our ways of living, in our interactions with others. So that is very important. How we can, every day we can do a few acts which advances the culture of peace. That brings me to the Summer of Peace 2012. And we have the director of the Summer of Peace 2012, Philip Helmick. He is a director of peace in the Shift Network, a network which is emerging as a strong pull together of many well-meaning, good-thinking, peace-loving people all over the world. So special welcome to you, Philip, that you are here joining us at this. Tell us what is ahead of us in the area of culture of peace.
Wonderful, Ambassador Chowdhury. Thank you, Ambassador Chowdhury, other distinguished guests, and peace builders around the world, particularly to my friends in sub-Saharan Africa. I want to just say why this subject, culture peace, is really dear and personal to me is because I lived in Sierra Leone 4 years before the war in small villages, and I got to go back during the war and then after the war and to see the impact of the arms trade and a culture of violence on my loved ones. But I also got to work with peace builders in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and other parts of sub-Saharan Africa. I met some of the most inspiring people who were doing incredible work that the world didn't know about. And I just thought we really needed to bring a focus to the positive transformation that's happening in difficult places. And so the Summer of Peace, when invited to head up the Summer of Peace, I was thrilled because what we were going to do is to acknowledge and celebrate the peace builders around the world, and then to invite involvement. As Rick Alphick would say, we were going to inspire, inform, and then involve people around the world. From the inner to the international, and across, as Avon would say, multiple pathways and sectors of society. Now, we had over a year and a half leading up to it. So we had different summits, telesummits, and one of them was youth. Generation Waking Up was part of it, where we went around the world 24 hours on the hour, every hour, interviewing young peace builders who were doing phenomenal work, from New Zealand to Australia, Japan, in Cambodia, where they're addressing the after effects of genocide, in Tanzania and South Africa and Jerusalem and all around the world. And these peace builders, it's like a wave of peace, like the International Day of Peace going around the world. Just these inspiring stories of young people saying, yes, we can and we will. So we were bringing attention to these peace builders there. And then we also then trained hundreds of peace ambassadors in over 40 countries with the idea that they would be involved in the Summer of Peace. And many of them in Kathmandu and Tanzania, in the Middle East, and also in Oakland, where there's a group of 30 peace ambassadors who have the mayor of Oakland on the International Day of Peace ready to commit itself to being an international city of peace. And so these peace builders, and the Summer of Peace was informed by a wisdom council, which include Ambassador Chowdhury, Avon Madison, James Adee, and others. It was a co-creation of many partner groups like the Culture of Peace Initiative, the Pathways to Peace, Alliance for Peace Building, the Peace Alliance, Peace Day TV, National Peace Academy. The list goes on and on. Gaia Field Project, co-sponsors like the global movement of culture of peace. Together, we created a framework, and the framework was where people could share what it is that they're doing, both on the Culture Meet Peace Initiative site, Summer Peace site, other sites, the 11 Days of Global Unity, what you're doing for peace, and then also calls to action. So this is what you can do. And someone earlier had said, you know, she felt isolated in doing her peace work. And we heard this throughout the Summer of Peace, people saying, I have felt so isolated, but now I realize I'm part of a larger community. And together we're part of something bigger. The other part of the Summer of Peace has been a telesummit, where over the entire summer we interviewed over 120 peace builders, and it's still going on, from multiple different pathways and sectors of society, looking at forgiveness, nonviolence, education, communication, science, business, arts and culture, justice, healing cultural wounds, military, and then politics and governance. And throughout this, what we witness is that there is a culture of peace emerging from the hearts, minds, and souls of people around the world. It's happening in multiple sectors of society, and it's happening in everyone's own unique gifts and own unique ways. For example, scientists, leading scientists have proven now that humans are hardwired for compassion and love. Scientists are also there are several themes that came out, like scientists are saying we're interconnected on a quantum field of consciousness, which is the same thing that a yoga monk said 2 days later, that a Peruvian shaman said days later, that an economist later said. So we're seeing people are saying the same thing. We're interconnected, we're interdependent. We also have had really heartbreaking stories, such as Azim Khamisa, who lost his only son to senseless gang violence. And after 40 days of grieving, his spiritual teacher told him, it's time to stop grieving and to live, promote peace in your son's name. And Azim Khamisa has touched millions of people on how to forgive and also how to reduce violence. And for me, this is powerful because I've seen this in sub-Saharan Africa. Kimmy Weeks was 9 years old, and they thought he was dead in a refugee camp, threw his body onto a mass grave, and when his mother found him, he looked into her eyes, and that moment, he made a commitment to God that I will dedicate my life to helping children around the world to avoid the situation. Kimmy Weeks later worked with Search for Common Ground, created a radio program in Liberia called Golden Kids News that has been replicated in over 20 countries around the world, touching millions of people, giving children a voice. And what this shows me is that the spirit of peace in humanity, the human spirit, no matter how difficult the crisis will be, will rise up and it will express itself in its own way. And all we have to do is tap into our humanity, listen to that voice, and let it sing through us. And we all become instruments of peace. And together we're creating a global symphony. And believe me, the crises are rising. And to me, I have hope because I know I've seen it. We can rise above it. Some other things that have come through with the Summer of Peace. So one of the series was put together by the Gaia Field Project called the Spirituality and Peace series on Sundays, where every week there was a different spiritual tradition from a different part of the world praying and meditating for peace. The power of prayer. Scientists have documented the power of prayer. And so here they are from all these different traditions. And David Nichol, who headed up this, God love him, he had a vision of people around the world meditating and praying for peace. And together with the Culture of Peace Initiative, what he has done, he's created a coalition of hundreds of groups around the world. On the International Day of Peace, will be doing the largest coordinated meditation and prayer for peace in history. Hundreds of cities will be involved in this. BeThePeace.com. All of us can join it. BeThePeace.com. Meditate with Hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And this is an important theme that came out through the Summer of Peace, is that many people acknowledge, Arun Gandhi as well as John Coker in Sierra Leone said, we have to be the change we want to see. We have to be peace. The process of creating peace is more important than the outcome. And for me, this really hits home, because Sierra Leone, the war was fueled by a global economy, fueled by consumption. Millions of Western countries and others massively consuming, trying to find the pursuit of happiness, and we can never find it through consumerism. And meanwhile, that is driving the trade where resources across Africa are being taken in inappropriate ways. Inner peace is a global responsibility. We can no longer afford to have hundreds of millions of people consuming, looking for something they'll never find through consumption. And believe me, that one really hits home, because when the villages I lived in were sacked with AK-47s, with blood diamonds and timber trade, I know it firsthand. The other things that came out in the Summer of Peace is we had heroes arise that you would never imagine. Pete Carroll is the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks football team. When he was a coach at USC in Los Angeles, he heard about the murders in Los Angeles. He gathered people from different sectors of Los Angeles saying, we're spending billions of dollars on violence, but let's collaborate, let's synergize. And more important, like Shireen said, let's listen to what the communities need. Let's listen and design a program based on what the community needs. And we've heard this from many other peace builders. We must listen to one another. Pete Carroll said if countries were to listen to one another with respect, we'd have a lot less violence in the world. And that theme came up with multiple ones also. Now, just the series for me, having the opportunity, a bird's eye view of interviewing, many of these people, it's just like there is a wave. And many people are concerned about the crisis. Many people are concerned about the systems breaking down. And at the same time, people are saying we have to also look at what's emerging and focus and fuel what's emerging away from systems that are based on separation and dominance to systems that can be designed around interdependence, interconnectedness, and then also mutual respect and understanding. Those are the systems that are going to come out, what's emerging. Now, there's 3 new initiatives that really thrill me. Well, the Be the Pieces, I've already mentioned. Another initiative, next week we're meeting in Washington, D.C. The Alliance for Peacebuilding has organized a Peace in the Military Conference. Some of the leading strategists from the U.S. Defense Department, together with other militaries, are coming together with peace and conflict resolution specialists, together with people working in the area of consciousness, science, and spirituality for a dialogue. And some of these people included one man who was speaking on 9/11, who was in the U.S. Navy for 30 years, who got on the line and spoke out and said, we must reduce the military spending. And I think it's critical to acknowledge the positive role that a lot of these leading military strategists are stepping forward and saying. Puck Mickelby, if you look at grand strategy, a new grand strategy for the United States, he says we must reduce military spending and, we must start spending more in education. So we're going to be meeting, and this is a type of meeting where you bring different sectors of society together to get a more holistic view, and then come out with new ideas of new ways of being. And yes, we can reduce the military spending, and yes, we can also start to create the conditions of culture of peace by investing in education and so forth. Another initiative that is very, very dear to my heart, today in New Mexico, at a gathering at the SEED conference, James O'Dea, who was our lead faculty for peace, who had also been the director of Amnesty International in Washington, D.C., and the Institute of Nordic Science in California, made an announcement to the indigenous elders, mainly from the Americas, but also other parts of the world who were there, a declaration of commitment to indigenous peoples. And this had 4 points. This is critical. The 4 points were, we must apologize for the atrocities committed to indigenous peoples around the world, particularly the United States. I mean, if you think about how the United States was built, it was built on indigenous peoples. We must take responsibility for our actions. We must seek reconciliation. And we also must seek collaboration. Many peace builders in South Africa and other parts of the world say we cannot really move forward until we look back truthfully, honestly to what's happened in the past and we reconcile it. It is time for the world to step forward in declaration of commitment to indigenous people. You can sign it yourself, declarationofcommitment.com. That's declarationofcommitment.com. And together, because what the other aspect of this declaration acknowledges, we're in a time where we need profound wisdom. Avon said the word wisdom over and over again, even though I think Avon basically embodies wisdom, is we need wisdom from our indigenous elders. We need the wisdom coming from the scientific community. We need the wisdom that's coming out from all sectors of society to come together to address the crises that we're facing and together co-create a culture of peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. This is very good. You brought out some of the wonderful actions or things that are happening all around the world. So this is beautiful, and we are looking forward to your conclusion of the Summer of Peace on the 21st of December, International Day of Peace, and I would like all of you to join in that big effort. You mentioned about reconciliation. Yesterday, at the General Assembly Hall again, the President of the General Assembly took an initiative for viewing of a documentary on forgiveness and reconciliation. And then got 3 lead thinkers, activists on the issue of forgiveness. And he wanted to highlight that issue. And I think this is very wonderful that when we work here in this organization, which is basically an intergovernmental organization, and they deal with issues, what they think are hardcore issues of peace and security, we need to bring in some of these essential elements which makes the foundation of human society: forgiveness, reconciliation, spirituality. These things need to come into our work. We need to think more solidly about those things. Next, and the final speaker, is Sharon Deep. She is the spokesperson of the Global Movement for the Culture of Peace, and her organization is a coalition of NGOs who promote the culture of peace, the implementation of the program of action. So, Sharon, the final words are your responsibility.
Okay, a few final words. The first one I want to say is, wow. Whew. What a day. Right, it may be my final word too. I'm looking out at all of you in this room, and what a long day we've had. We're working hard, and what a wonderful panel. So I'm saying wow on many levels. I'm here serving simply as the spokesperson for the global movement for the culture of peace, with a focus on the UN Declaration for the Culture of Peace and the Program of Action. We all sleep with this underneath our pillow. We listen to these great stories that are told day in and day out that's going on around the world, and then we look at this little blue book and we say, where is this program of action being fleshed out by all these wonderful men and women of goodwill from around the planet? I'd like to begin with a note of recognition, actually, and an appreciation for the pioneering efforts of Ambassador Chowdhury in partnering with civil society. We're grateful. We're grateful to have you as a partner, Ambassador Chowdhury. We love you. I'd also like to send out heartfelt thanks to the outgoing President of the General Assembly, who has kept an open-door policy in partnering with civil society, encouraging civil society to develop and unite our voices in cooperation, one voice that is shared and brought forth for the good of the whole. And it is from this appreciation and recognition of both the President's efforts and the Ambassador's efforts that the way forward toward the culture of peace becomes clearer. The way forward is in partnering and in cooperating. Civil society as a group stands within a richness and depth of many varied endeavors. The way forward is in partnering and in cooperating, and in so doing, it gestates a new level of awareness. We become aware of how we are connected. In the Declaration on the Culture of Peace, on the very first page, it recalls the Constitution of UNESCO, actually, which states that since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. We've heard it today. This always reminds me of how Albert Einstein is often quoted as saying, "No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it." And of how Bob Marley sings in his redemption song, "None but ourselves can free our minds." And in the program of action on page 9, it states that partnerships between and among us are to be encouraged and strengthened for a global movement for the culture of peace. It's all in this book. Our way forward as a global movement for the culture of peace is in partnering and in cooperating, and in gestating a new level of consciousness that through holding thoughts of each other close to our hearts and in support and in strength for each other and for the whole, wherein each is for all and all is for each. We can together right now use our creative imaginations to visualize all the men and women in the world, working on various endeavors that, known or unknown, become united in spiritual approach through intentions for goodwill. Our one united voice that the President has asked us to strengthen and to bring forth may rise out of our intention for goodwill or of our love in action. As we practice the one voice of goodwill in our homes, in our groups, our neighborhoods, our organizations, workplace, schools, communities, towns, and villages, we can then begin to expect this goodwill to emerge from our leaders as well. Goodwill is contagious, and in our mind's eye, let us see it spreading throughout our planet. It's a global movement for the culture of peace. Let's use our one voice in calling out around the world for all the men and women of goodwill to join us right now in this room. We can invite them to be part of our high-level forum. We don't know everyone's name, but we call them. We call them because we can. And using our creative imaginations, we can visualize them coming. They come from the past, the present, and the future. They come because we call them. They come from every country. Men and women of goodwill from all 193 countries from around the world are here. Some of us are raising their flags. We're all meeting together here in the United Nations, and we call in all the Secretary Generals and the ambassadors, past, present, and future, to join us. More flags. Let us together partner, cooperate, and gestate the needed new levels of consciousness that promotes the culture of peace and the program of action. Yes, you're looking beautiful. Let us become aware of all of us together around the world, people of goodwill, standing together within this space that we've created. Let us realize we're together here on a land that belongs to no one nation, but to all nations. Let us gather in a spirit of cooperation, unanimous in our group appeal, united in one voice, standing together in this way, we become love and action. Look at this. Let us have the group endeavor of balancing all of our relationships with each other, with our environment, with nature, and with all that within which we live and move and have our being. Between us and among us, there is a collective power that emerges from our willingness to focus with fixed intent upon world goodwill. We are just beginning to tap into that power, to be aware that we can create together a global movement for the culture of peace. And in using our creative imaginations, let us be grateful for all those great spiritual and cosmic lives that look over and guide our planetary evolution. Perhaps as part of a cosmic movement for the creation of the culture of peace, we might hear them whispering a chant to encourage us onward, to press forward. And it might go like this. There ain't no power like the power of the people, 'cause the power of the people won't stop. There ain't no power like the power of the people, 'cause the power of the people won't stop. There ain't no power like the power of the people, 'cause the power of the people won't stop. There ain't no power like the power of the people, 'cause the power of the people won't stop. Let us know today that we, the people, are equal to the task at hand, that we see the way forward, and with one hand on our heart, we know we are connected to each other, and with the other hand, we reach out with a love to all and for all, and it is an action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sharon. That was a wonderful, wow ending. That's beautiful. And I think this is the first time I saw instead of the cameras clicking on the podium was clicking on the audience. And so that was wonderful, and that's beautiful. And I would like to thank you for that inspirational ending to the presentations from the podium. Now the inspiration has to come from you. You have to tell us what we can do to move ahead. What is the way forward? Tell us your thoughts. Let us be inspired by you. So the floor is open. Okay, Dominica, well, I have a list of speakers from the member states. Please, Malaysia wanted to speak. The colleague from Malaysia.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, moderator. I wish to congratulate the President of the General Assembly for convening the high-level forum on the culture of peace. I would like to also thank you and distinguished panelists for your invaluable views on the way forward to further the agenda of the culture of peace. We are deeply concerned of the horrifying stories presented by some panelists. We share the views of many on the need to address the myriad of problems that we face today, especially problems that are hindering our progress in promoting peace and achieving peace. We can also understand some of you that have felt alone at times. Malaysia has been involved in many initiatives in which the same problem has been cited again and again. While most of the people of the world support peace, violence and extremism continues to flourish. It is perpetuated by a few. Yet these few have managed to hold the world at ransom and instill fear in the hearts of the majority. It is because of this that at the general debate of the 65th session of the UN General Assembly, Malaysia's Prime Minister made a clarion call to rally the moderates, the majority of peace-loving people from all over the world, to stand for what they believe in, to counter and drown the voices of the extremists. The Prime Minister called for a global movement of the moderates, or GMM, in short. In essence, this was made on the belief that the future would not be one between the East and West, between developed and developing countries, nor between different faiths. The future would be one between the moderates and the extremists of all religions and beliefs. During the ASEAN Summit in Phnom Penh in April 2012, ASEAN leaders unanimously endorsed and adopted the initiative on GMM. GMM would be one of ASEAN's positive contributions in achieving global peace. For us, moderation is about balance, mutual respect, understanding, dialogue, compromise, and justice. While it is highly esteemed value in various religions and philosophies, the focus of GMM is not on religion alone. It is a common approach and a guide for action in all areas and can be applied at various levels, be it domestic, political, economic, social, and international level. I am pleased to inform that Malaysia has successfully hosted the inaugural International Conference on Global Movement of Moderates in Kuala Lumpur in January this year. The theme for the conference was, fittingly enough, in pursuit of an enduring and just peace. Throughout the conference, various international and local speakers presented their views on moderation from different aspects such as the economy, social politics, religion, and foreign policy. Over 500 participants attended the conference from all over the world, consisting of government leaders, academicians, international organizations, corporate leaders, religious leaders, and think tanks. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I wish to say that the GMM certainly complements the 1999 Programme of Action on the Culture of Peace. As such, Malaysia wishes to invite all to support the GMM and look forward to cooperate in promoting moderation to counter extremism in all its forms. Nevertheless, we do not doubt that the road ahead will be long and arduous. There will be distraction along the way, but in the end, the moderates will prevail, and our victory will hopefully usher in a period of global peace and prosperity for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Hanif, for that statement. We welcome you in this panel discussion, and we look forward to your contribution, further contribution. So now I understand the representative of the Dominican Republic or civil society? Or your, yes, please, the lady over there. Let me mention one thing as before you start. Two things rather. One is that some of you may be wondering what happened to one of our panelists, Kathleen Kuhnest, director of the U.S. Institute of Peace. Her daughter has fallen very sick and she had to cancel coming here from Washington. So that's why we moved Philip from the morning session to the afternoon session so that he has more time to speak. The morning session was squeezed a little bit. So that is what it is. The second, as you know, the closing session with the President of the General Assembly and the Deputy Secretary General, Ambassador Jan Eliasson, is supposed to start at 4:30. While we wait for them, we will continue our panel discussion, and as they arrive, we'll suspend our discussion and then move into the closing session. I hope that is a practical arrangement that we can make. So we will wait for them and then go on with their comments. Please, ma'am. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marie Claudine Mukamawano. I am a survivor of genocide. I lost my parents, my grandparents, my uncle, my auntie, and my cousins. And my big sister, she was cut with machetes after raping her. So I'm here on behalf of Rwandan orphans. You know, in Rwanda we have over 1 million of orphans. We have children who live by themselves, young girls who support their young siblings. So, back? Okay. Thank you. It's okay right here? Okay. Technology. So my name is Marie Claudine Mukamawano. I'm the lucky one who survived the genocide in Rwanda. As I said, I lost my parents. My grandparents were all killed. My big sister, they cut her with machetes after raping her. So I created an organization called Why Do I Exist to help the survivor of genocide. As you know, in Rwanda, we have over 1 million of orphans. We have children who live by themselves, young girls, 20 years old, even 18 years old, they take care of their young siblings. They sacrifice their life in order to support their young siblings. So my organization is Why Do I Exist? You can check a website, whydoexist.org. His Excellency was talking about how we can inspire, we can get inspiration. One thing I have here, it's a CD called The Power of Forgiveness. It's one of my artists. Her name is Elvani. She wrote the different songs about the power of forgiveness, how Holy Spirit can help us to heal. And then the question I'm going to ask you, as not only as a survivor of genocide or as a peacemaker, because I call myself peacemaker, I will host International Day for Peace at Newark City Hall, and raising the flag of Rwanda as a symbol of healing, forgiveness, resilience, and then overcoming the trauma to the survivors everywhere, not only in Rwanda. So my question today, as a graduated from International Trauma Studies student program directed by Dr. So, who is a professor at Columbia University. My question today is about healing not only the survivors or the victim of war, healing the young girls around the world, the women, to overcome the fear of feeling that they don't have a power. We are talking about gender and justice. We are talking about empowering women and young girls. How can we use technology? Earlier, my sister, she mentioned the impact of the technology. We know today, in this day's world, Facebook is a great tool. LinkedIn is a great tool. We can create a group on social media. We can talk about this culture of peace, not only here at United Nations, not only in America. Because if we use social media, if we, all of us here, we created a social media campaign, like we use Facebook, all of us together. We sign up. We know that we're going to promote peace. Peace will not only be among of ourselves here. Peace will go everywhere to those people on a grassroots level, those people who live in the area where they don't have any representative who can come on their behalf here at United Nations to talk about this culture of peace. So how can we do this? How can we take action? I love to take action because I emphasize the fact that God saved my life during the genocide. So how can we do what we have to do today in order to promote peace? I will do it. So please tell me what we have to do now in order of using the tool we have, social media. We can make what, like the president of the Peace Foundation was saying before, that what is impossible today will be possible tomorrow. In the 80s or 1999 was impossible to reach out to everybody with the social media. Now we have a social media. How can we make what was impossible a long time ago possible today? Thank you very much.
I think those of us who use Facebook or Twitter or anything, send out hundreds of messages today. How you got inspired this afternoon or the whole day of this high-level forum. Send out little short messages, not long ones, so that they have an impact. So there are some young people in the back. I would like to hear from them. So which one of you will take the floor? Oh, all of you, all five standing up. Okay, good.
Even sure what time it is. Do I need to sit down? Okay, all right. Well, on behalf of the International We Love You Foundation, we are all actually ambassadors of the chairwoman, Jang Il-ja, who from South Korea has actually already started a huge movement, a worldwide movement of peace in just about every country across the globe. And we stand here on the East Coast in New York City in the United Nations at this time because we are her representatives, and we are so delighted to, first of all, have been a part of this forum today. We've all learned something, we've all learned a lot, actually. As a team, we've learned so much, and we're delighted that we could be here today. And we're most delighted, actually, that we can tell you that we know what the fulfillment of everything that you're talking about actually is. And that's a very bold statement to make, but we promise it's true. The United Nations, you say in this booklet, it says the culture of peace is a set of values, attitudes, traditions, and modes of behavior and ways of life based on respect, based on promotion of human rights, and so on. These things we should already naturally do, but it's so difficult for us sometimes to fulfill it when we don't get what we want, when we're not satisfied. We tend to lash out. But actually, through the movement that we've seen through the International We Love You Foundation, people who have once felt that way are being changed through massive environmental cleanups, disaster relief efforts for people that are in need. You know, the International We Love You Foundation is responsible for changing the lives of hundreds of thousands of people across the world, in every country, even here in the United States. And it's amazing the changes that it makes when people work together as one unit fighting for a single cause, and that's to share the love of a mother. We believe entirely in the love of mother to be able to bring peace to the entire world. And anybody can say that they give love, but to genuinely give love means to sacrifice and to nurture until you can do it no longer. And mothers are really well known for that. And we see from the example of the chairwoman, Jang Il-ja, that is exactly what she does, and that's the same thing that we want to follow. And we urge all of you here today to...
Thank you very much. And that was it. I have a long list while I'm being advised that the President and the Deputy Secretary General are about to arrive. So please make your comments one-sentence comments. So Judy first, then Carol, and then please.
So thank you so much, Ambassador Chowdhury. I have a response to your invitation to have a suggestion. So I'm Judy Kuryansky. I'm representative of the International Association of Applied Psychology and the Psychology Coalition here at the UN. So 2 suggestions. One is that we all care now what's going to happen after the Millennium Development Goals. So after the Millennium Development Goals, with the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to have peace be included in those goals. That will be important. My second suggestion is there was the Decade of Peace, yes? And so since when should it end? We need to have another one.
Thank you, Ambassador. Yes, the Peacemaker Corps just wants to say a few very short words. I know I spoke this morning, but we have some programs that we're working on, and I'd like to have everybody in this room kind of call to actions. We've implemented and designed 2 programs. One is to reach the youth across this world to create a movement to create peace in the street. And the way we want to do that is that we want to have videos sent to us from every part of the world, from kids that are from 8 years old to 18, to tell us about how they would make peace in the street, in their own world. Can you imagine having millions of 1-minute or 2-minute stories from the street that we can then collate and put together? That movement would create millions more. The other thing we want to do, which I think is very important, is to train first responders, those of the UNDP, the Peace Corps, people who go into chaos when there's either man-made chaos like wars or natural resource. We find that women and children are the biggest, the violence against them escalates like a hockey stick when they're in refugee camps. We want to talk about how we can take the culture of peace into those camps immediately, just the same as water, food, and shelter, and start to help these people heal. That's an important part of what the lessons that the Peacemaker Corps is bringing. And all of this will be delivered through social media and through the web to the whole millions and millions of people in this world, and we hope everybody will join us.
Thank you. Thank you. Here, this lady, Madam.
I'm Pauline Cantwell with Peace Caucus and Peace Action, and I'm concerned that when we talk about disarmament, we don't include the military's ability to control the weather. Our Air Force has a paper, Owning the Weather, in 2025, owning it. It's 3,000 pages long. They talk about creating artificial weather. This is, and Senator Lyndon Johnson, who later became President of the United States, said in 1958, "From space, the masters of infinity would have the power to control the Earth's weather, to cause drought and flood, to change the tides and raise the levels of the sea, to divert the Gulf Stream and change temperate climate to frigid." When our militaries come in and act as rescuers, we have to be aware that the militaries of the world have the ability to control the weather, and they are doing it. And one hurricane has the force of many Hiroshima bombs. So we have to keep up how military has evolved to robotic warfare and hold up the NMOD Convention that went into force here in the United Nations in 1978, banning the hostile manipulation of weather and climate. We need to strengthen that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a very important point. Ms. Ain, thank you for a wonderful performance this morning in the flute.
Inviting me. I have a very simple one sentence, that we use the meditation room here for 15 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, and just breathe for a while.
Thank you. Wonderful. Way back.
Hello.
Hear me? Good. After 9/11, I was invited to the rebuilding of downtown, and I created an artistic resources consortium with a confidential committee for peace and justice. This conference has been very, very interesting and inspiring. Right now, I'm having a show entitled Transformation for Change, as we were made for more with the Spirit. I'd like us to synergize our spirits more and be more resilient for unity. And thanks, Philip, for mentioning these words, the holistic view of life. Because if we don't try to synergize our spirits and build that in unity, we will not become stronger. So let's keep up the good work, and those who are involved, try to synergize their spirits into others and inspire them that they can become involved for change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Melvin here.
Thank you. We have heard a lot of needs and a lot of ways to create peace on the planet. And I suggest that everybody use the International Day of Peace, all of us together, to showcase our ways of bringing peace on the planet and creating a culture of peace all over the planet, and capturing societies, humanities, the medias, the governments, everybody's attention. One little thing about me, I work in the publishing industry, and 5 years ago I woke up on the International Day of Peace and decided to get the calendar publishers all over the world to print the International Day of Peace on calendars. It's on 1 billion calendars now. We have a good basis to work together to really capture humanity's heart. Thank you.
Thank you. The Deputy Secretary General has already arrived. I'll request him to join us. The President is also following. We'll change the thank you panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador
for wonderful.
Chowdhury.